Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miguel Rivera. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development with the Department of Housing. We will begin very shortly. Please make sure you mute your line. If you are on the video conference, you can access the function or action bar by moving the mouse to the center and slightly down. You will see a video camera icon and a microphone. You can click the microphone to control mute. I will be muting everyone during the call. What we also ask you to do is to utilize the action bar and open the show conversation so that you can participate and submit questions through the chat. To access that, you're going to go to the same action bar with the camera, microphone, and there's 3 dots that says More Actions. Click on More Actions, and you will see I'm sorry, not the 3 dots. Next to the 3 dots, you will see the Show Conversation icon. Click on that, and we will be monitoring that for questions. We still have some people joining. Okay, if you are on the audio only conference call, we ask that you participate with any questions by emailing us at info.cdbg@ct.gov. It's in the slides. This presentation is being recorded. It will be posted as soon as possible, along with any handouts, information, and a FAQ from today. Jerry, it's not forwarding. Okay, no. I can't scroll the, can you scroll that forward, Jerry? Okay, so I want to welcome everyone to this afternoon. We have over 100 participants. We're excited to share this information with you. Please keep in mind that the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant COVID or CV funds are for the purposes to prevent, prepare for, or respond to the COVID-19 epidemic. Today's agenda is an introduction. I quickly will introduce my CDBG team. I have Lilia, Dominic, Jerome, Paula, Jerry participating, and they will be presenting as well. I also have the Director of Oprah, Michael Santoro, who will be giving us some valuable information with regards to the citizen participation process and waivers. We will be discussing today the funding available. We will mention round 2 of the CDBG funds that are coming for COVID relief. We will be describing to you what you need to do with regards to the waivers, with regards to public services and citizen participation. What has not been waived, in particular the environmental review requirements, eligible activities, and oops, it's not showing me. I can't see the bottom slide part. Why, but I apologize for any technical difficulties that we will have as we continue.
The application process and questions.
Thank you. Application process and questions. My action bar blocks it out. Okay, let's move forward. If you are new to the Microsoft Teams 365, scroll mouse to center and down for your action bar again. You can unmute yourself once we call on you for a question and answer. And we ask you again to utilize the show chat to keep track of questions or submit your questions. Again, if you're on the phone, please press *6 to unmute yourself when we are called on. And if you'd like to submit via email, please email info.cdbg@ct.gov. And again, the presentation is being recorded. At this time, I'd like to turn this over to Michael Santoro, our Director of Office Policy Research and Housing Support.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Miguel, and welcome everybody. There are about 114 participants, and I think that is fantastic. We're going to talk about Tranche 1 of the Small Cities Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 funding available. We have Tranche 1 funding currently available. We got 8.138549 from the federal government, of which 7.8 and change will be available to you in order to prevent, prepare for, or respond to COVID-19. In addition, you can use local program income, if you have any on hand, to address the COVID-19 issue. You simply need to request the use of those program income funds from your CDBG program manager. But again, you can only use funds under that waiver to prevent, prepare for, or respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, we recently received notification that we will be getting a second COVID-19 allocation under CDBG. That allocation is about $11,437,547, of which we anticipate $11,208,796 will be available to you. It's very important to understand we are taking as little out as we have to and making the rest available to you. The one difference with the COVID Tranche 2 funds, eligible applicants may include the entitlements. A decision has not yet been made as to whether we will allow the entitlements to apply for portions of these funds. If you have an opinion, please feel free to share it. Okay. We're going to talk about the waivers. And the reason we're going to talk about the waivers is there are two important components that you need to be aware of. The first waiver I'm going to talk about is associated with the citizen participation, reasonable notice, and opportunity to comment. The specific citations are noted in the waiver and on the screen. In addition, the explanation can be found as part of the mega waiver and the notice. In short, HUD is allowing us and thereby allowing you to reduce your citizen participation. But in order to do it, you must follow the process. What that process is, you must amend your local citizen participation plan to be a reduced citizen participation and then adopt that amended plan. You can then implement it and thereby reduce both citizen participation and the time necessary associated with that issue. You are allowed to determine what constitutes reasonable notice and opportunity to comment based on local circumstances and conditions within certain federal parameters. Those federal parameters are spelled out in a second waiver that applies to CDBG. Specifically, you must notice the availability of your amended CP plan. It must be posted for a minimum of 5 days in a newspaper of local circulation and posted on your governmental website for that same 5-day period. You must take public comment on your amended citizen participation plan during that 5-day period. But then after those 5 days, assuming you don't want to make any changes based on the comments you received, you are then able to use that reduced citizen participation plan. Your citizen participation plan must detail what you intend to do for citizen participation, and it must meet the minimum requirements in the mega waiver, that second section that I talked about. The minimum 30-day period, which is normally required, can be waived, and your new CP plan can bring that down to as few as 5 days. We, the state of Connecticut, have. Our amended CP plan is up on our website. You are welcome to review it and copy it, or copy any portion thereof. Some form of public comment opportunity must be offered, again, based on local availability and circumstances. It can be limited, but it must be justifiable and justified in your local record. As I indicated a second ago, we have adopted a 5-day public comment period, both in writing or electronic submission, and we hold a virtual public hearing. What we did for a number of our plans already was follow that 5-day period, collected comments, and we have a copy of the virtual public hearing posted on our website. At a minimum, you need to do that. You can do more if local circumstances will allow. If you have one for soliciting public comment, you can include these in your amended CP plan, but you must be able to accept public comment of some kind for at least a 5-day period. Regardless, after you amend your citizen participation plan, please be sure to follow it for your activity notification. If you have questions on this, please submit them in the chat box. We will address them towards the end. Next waiver. The 15% cap on public service activities has been waived at the state level on CDBG CV Tranche 1. That means, theoretically, we could spend all $7.8 million on public service or public service-related activities. However, this does not apply to program income. If you attempt to use your program income for COVID-19 related activities, even after DOH approval, you cannot exceed the 15% cap with that money. If this is unclear, please reach out to your program manager and they can explain in more detail. What has not been waived, and this is very important for you to understand. Procurement, fair housing non-discrimination, relocation or displacement, Davis-Bacon labor standards, and the most important one, environmental review requirements. This is important in particular when it comes to eligible activities, and I will talk about one right now. CDBG CV can be used towards your local government's FEMA public assistance match. That is, as most of you know, FEMA reimburses on a 75-25% basis under the public assistance program. However, HUD has come down on a more stringent side of interpretation relative to the environmental review, even for public service. In order to use CDBG CV funds as your 25% FEMA match, your environmental review must be complete and must be approved by your local environmental review officer before you incur any cost. So that means you have completed your environmental review and been signed off by your environmental review officer, CDBG CV will not be eligible to be used as your 25% FEMA match. However, if any of you have already completed your environmental review in anticipation of the receipt of CDBG CV funds, and it has been signed off by your environmental review officer, then you are encouraged to apply for these funds to assist you in meeting your local needs. This would be in addition to any other CDBG eligible activity that you wish to undertake prospectively, again, that prepares for, prevents, or responds to COVID-19. You will see this message repeated throughout. It is the most important thing to remember. Again, if you have questions on the waivers or anything that I have talked about, please submit it in the chat box, email it to the email box identified at the beginning of the presentation, and we will do our best to address them before the end of the day. Thank you. I will now attempt to turn over control to Lilia.
Good afternoon.
Oh.
I'm going to go right into the slides, Jerry, if you can proceed into the first one. I'm also going to be talking a little bit on the environmental review. Overall, what small cities CDBG CV activities are required to do the environmental review? It's all of them. As was mentioned earlier by Mike, if there is an interest to use the CDBG CV funds for federal match purposes, your environmental review has had to have been completed by January 1st of this year. There's also a way for you to use these newest CDBG CV funds for any pre-application costs as you're preparing your application, but again, the environmental review had to have been completed by March 30th. So please keep that in mind. Environmental reviews are purely driven by your planned activity. You have to determine what your activity is and how that is going to impact the environment in the way how it will impact land, air, sea, anything that will have any adverse effects or any lasting health hazards. This is a special process developed by HUD as they implement NEPA, National Environment Protection Act, and using Part 58, and also a lot of several more important statutes. The goal overall is early planning that encourages public participation with your environmental review record that becomes available to the public. Next slide. So as each of you are thinking or formulating your projects, you have to pick a certifying officer that will do the review. That person will be responsible to fill out all the forms that we'll have available to you. He does the research. They make the evaluation. They're responsible for it, and they have to report on it to HUD. For this funding, there's basically 3 types of reviews only. You're going to be looking at the first one, bulleted exempt determinations. That's if you're hoping to use the funds for any professional services, for data, financial, or counseling, or other items to purchasing of tools, supplies, or food. The next category would be what they call sense, category excluded activities not subject to Part 58. This would be a project that's using the funding for operational costs, maintenance, security, staff training. The last variety is CEST, which is a project that is category excluded but subject to Part 58. This is where all the building rehab projects would fall under. But as someone mentioned earlier, there's no using any of our funds currently for any public facilities. Just a comment back about the certifying officer that will be completing the environmental review record. If you are having a consultant help you with this, the consultant cannot be the certifying officer. Next slide. So as you've gotten through your determination with your environmental review record almost complete, and your project seems to be clear, there are some notices that are required, public notices. The first being a published notice on a website posting or a newspaper of a FONSI. They call it a finding of no significant impact that has to be published as such and wait through a 15-day comment period. The next public notice would be a NOI, notice of intent, that you're going to be requesting for the release of funds for this project from HUD. And that's also it's also on a website posting or a newspaper, and it needs a 7-day comment period. There is an additional combination. There may be one way of avoiding one step in here, and I'm going to ask Miguel to talk about that in his next presentation, in the next few slides, but we can get through that if there's one of these requirements that drop off. And then overall, you are going to be heading to the requesting the release of these funds from HUD. It's called a RUF, Request for Release of Funds. It's a form, actually, we stated the form number on the slide here, and that gets submitted to HUD. And if you just wait for their approval, and it seems like your environmental review record is complete, and it may be ready to go, and you'll be able to use your funds as planned. That's the end of my presentation. I think we go back to Miguel now.
Thank you so much, Lilia. My presentation is going to be focused on simply how you're going to prepare your environmental review sample documents. And I'm going to share my screen. And let's see if I can find it. Okay. I am going to reduce the size of this sample format just so that you can see a little bit clearer. But on your municipal letterhead, and these documents will all be provided to you in a Word format. So literally you just have, you'll be able to type into the forms the information that's necessary. So on your municipal letterhead, you will be completing 2 checklists that will look similar. This particular one is for the exempt determinations. As you can see, you'll just enter the municipality name under grant recipient, a tentative project name, we're not going to hold you to it, the project description. As best as possible, include all aspects of your project. That includes administrative activities, and I'll point them out. Your funding source will be CDBG and other. You can highlight them, bold them. The estimated funding amount for your project activity. At this point, we do not have a grant number identified, but you can type in COVID. From here, this form is interactive in Word, and you will be able to click and unclick each of these little categories. So I'm going to zoom in very quickly. Everyone will be doing an environmental and/or other studies for these funds. You would click that. And administrative and management activities, you would click that. If you're unsure, click it, and we will be reviewing them with you so that we would have any corrections if necessary. The responsible entity would need to sign these cover sheets. That would be, in most cases, your highest elected official, being a town or city manager, or a mayor or first select person, or their designated individual which has to be in writing, and their designation has to be provided with the items for the environmental review. The second page is for the exclusions not subject to. Again, very simple. You can even copy and paste the information. You can also see the checklist will be interactive. One moment, I'm trying to admit someone. Okay, I'm back. Can everyone still see the Adobe PDF document? I'm going to take
Yes.
that as a yes. Thank you. Okay, so again, these items will be checked off. Again, the person responsible entity will sign, and there will be one form with regards to the environmental review for both the not subject to and the exempt. The information is very simple. Again, just this will be a Word document. You can enter all the corresponding information, and as you can see, it's all repetitive. You will be marking off in this area, if you submit both cover sheets, mark off both for the level of environmental review. Grant number, you could identify COVID round 1, CDBG. For the program, funding amount would be the estimated amount that you're looking to do. And again, as you can see here, it asks them for information with regards to the total project cost. Now here's the key pieces here. These 3 statutory and regulatory items have to be filled. Non-applicable is an unacceptable response. If you need assistance with what you would be responding after you've completed your review, we have sample language that we will also include as a sample. You will need to identify the airport runway clearance zone, coastal barriers, and flood insurance. If you have a specific project site, we can make sure that you're identifying that appropriately. If you do not have an appropriate project site identified at this moment, we can leave that blank and we can have a conversation. And at the end, please, the responsible entity has to be the highest elected official, town manager, city manager, or their designated individual that's documented. Okay, so I'm going to unshare now my screen. Stop sharing. Okay, Geraldo, you should have the, yep, here we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Dominic Carew, and I will be talking to you folks about the eligible activities for this special round of COVID-19 funds. Myself and Jerome Mim, my colleague, we will talk to you about these various activities. Here we go. Okay. What are the eligible activities for this special round? Any activity that meets one of these 3 requirements. It must enable a community to prepare for COVID-19. It must enable a community to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Or it must enable a community to respond to the fallout of COVID-19. DOH has prioritized certain eligible activities for this tranche 1 round of funding. The 3 activities are, one would be the rehabilitation of buildings and improvements, including interim assistance, planning and capacity building and technical assistance, and 3, the provision of new quantifiably increased public services. When it comes to the rehabilitation of buildings and improvements, some examples would include DOH will fund projects that are geared to make interim improvements to private properties to enable an individual patient to remain quarantined on a temporary basis. Rehabilitate a commercial building or close school building to establish an infectious disease treatment clinic, example by replacing an HVAC system for that building. Or for the improvement of private properties, a chief executive officer may determine an emergency condition exists and requires the resolution of the CDBG funds to alleviate conditions that are threatening to the public health and safety of that community. Some more information can be found on these activities at section 105A4, 24 CFR 570-201F, and 570-202B. You can check those out for more details. In terms of planning, capacity building, and technical assistance, we are here to support as well. And please note that grant funds to the units of general local governments may be used to hire technical assistant providers to deliver CDBG training to new subrecipients and local governmental departments that are administering CDBG funds for the first time to assist with infectious disease response. Planning grants and planning only grants, please refer further to section 105A12, and these grant funds to units of local government may be used for planning activities in conjunction with any activity that may also be used for planning only as an activity. Remember, the 3 requirements to consider when thinking eligible activities for this special round: it must enable the community to prepare for COVID-19, it must enable the community to prevent the spread of COVID-19, and it must enable a community to respond to the fallout of COVID-19. More importantly, drink lots of this while you're figuring this out. My colleague Jerome will pick up from here to talk further about the public services.
Great, thank you, Dominic. So I'm going to wrap up with the third and final eligible activity that DOH will be prioritizing, which is public services. So if you remember, under the CARES Act, the 15% public services cap will no longer be applicable. So again, no cap, which is a good thing. Again, it's only applicable to the CARES Act. So the first activity that is
Please mute yourself so we can hear Jerome. Thank you.
Hi, this is Miguel Rivera. I have muted everyone. Jerome, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Miguel. So just to continue, please everyone, please mute your microphone. So the first activity again is to provide testing, diagnosis, or other services at a fixed or mobile location. I'm sure you've all heard about the drive-through testing that Harvard Hospital has done previously. So that would be an example of this. The second activity that we are prioritizing is providing equipment, supplies, and materials necessary to carry out a public service. And an example of this would be, for instance, providing personal protective equipment to first responders. Give an example. And then lastly, the third that we are prioritizing is delivering Meals on Wheels to quarantined individuals or individuals that need to maintain social distancing due to medical vulnerabilities. So this could take the form, for example, of a staff person driving around, not necessarily in a van as in the picture, as you can see, but driving around and delivering meals to senior citizens who would be vulnerable if they went out to a grocery store to buy groceries. So that concludes the 3 eligible activities that DOH is prioritizing to address COVID. I'm going to turn it over to Miguel to talk to you about the application process, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging on in there. I know we have a lot of information that we're providing, and we are recording this presentation. You might have just heard my cat. So the application process. Let's go. Just need the next slide. So For the CDBG CV Round 1 funds being distributed by DOH, we are doing a modified process to help expedite funding and the delivery of targeted services. DOH strongly recommends working with local social service agencies, your continuum of cares, coordinated access networks, and homelessness providers, health departments, and other providers to identify specific local needs. Applications must be submitted electronically and will be accepted by midnight, July 10th, 2020. Now, that doesn't mean you have to wait till July 10th, 2020. And we have a dedicated email. As you will see, it is sccvapplications@ct.gov. This email will be utilized again for round 2. Please utilize blue ink for signatures, as we will need to have those on file. We will not need you to submit anything non-electronically at this time that you need to maintain in your files. Next slide, please. Eligibility and threshold requirements. Program eligibility and threshold requirement standards are applicable to all applicants and activities unless otherwise noted. Eligible applicants at this time are municipalities that are identified as a small cities, typically less than 50,000 people. They can and have many times partnered with nonprofit organizations as the end beneficiary for providing services or rehabilitation to public facilities, for example. But all letter applications must come from the city or town or a region, much like what we've done with crumbling foundations or homelessness diversion services. It can be, the monies can be subgranted to the nonprofit to carry out those activities. Eligible activities. Only activities identified in the allocation plan as the priorities will be looked at for the initial funding round. Can you go back one slide? Sorry, I forgot the last thing. Please remember, a national objective has to also be met with regards to the total use of funds. Next slide. Please keep in mind the presentation made by Michael Santoro on citizen participation, the consolidated plan, and the fair housing and equal opportunity compliance. If you currently have or are working on one and need for some technical assistance, please let us know. Next slide. It's not a 5-step application process. I think it's just slide number 5. So you've started the process by participating today or listening sometime in the near future this presentation. From there, as you've heard from Mr. Santoro, the need for a virtual public hearing to take advantage of the waivers will be necessary. We ask to take advantage of not only general paper circulations, but also e-newspaper, other medias such as public radio, social media websites, and to get it out through your nonprofit partners as well. Oh, back one slide. Thank you. Okay. Once you start taking advantage, you'll be able to take advantage of the waiver. You'll be able to utilize the 5-day comment period. Next slide, please. Conduct an environmental review. Critical is just to start with the project description. And again, identifying all aspects of where the money will come. Also, you should not worry if the CDBG funds are paying or not paying for certain aspects of the project. We need to identify all funding for the project and the project in whole. As was mentioned earlier, CDBG CV funds can be utilized as a local match, but the environmental review would have to be completed on or after January 31st, 2020. CDBG funds used to cover incurred costs need to have been completed March 31st or after. Next slide, please. So here we go, our modified process. A letter of application. Much like you're familiar with a letter of intent, we are doing a letter of application. It should be on the letter of the city or town as who is leading the submission. Please describe the project and activity, including the number of persons you hope to be serving. Include a statement of need and how that proposed project is being undertaken to prepare for, respond to, or to prevent the COVID-19 pandemic. That is our mantra at this point in time: to prepare, to respond, and to prevent COVID-19 pandemic. Identify the amount of funding requesting. Describe why other funding may not be available. Requests must be signed by the chief elected official, which could be the town manager or city manager, mayor, or first select person, or their designee. And documentation of that designee's authority would be required. We also ask that you please include the town's DUNS number and FIIN number on the letter. Make sure that you're including the contact email and direct telephone number for the official signing the request, and the contact information for any other key individuals that you would like us to work with. We understand asking for the person in charge versus the person who knows what's going on are two different people in most cases. Reminder, all signatures need to be blue ink. This will be submitted electronically to the info email address. Next slide. Rating and ranking on the awards through DOH. As a glimpse, DOH staff will collect and review letters of application bi-weekly or more often if necessary. We intend to submit recommendations to the Commissioner for award announcements by the Governor as established following the program eligibility thresholds and requirements. Next slide. Depending on the nature of the proposed activity, site inspections may be conducted by DOH staff. I'm happy to inform that in about 3 weeks, the Department of Housing will be welcoming its newest building specialist with regards to increasing our ability to provide services and monitoring for building projects. The feasibility will be completed as part of the final application review, and recommendations will be to the Commissioner's office. Next slide, please. To the extent feasible, unsuccessful applicants will be afforded the option to have a debriefing meeting. Evaluation criteria for small cities CDBG CV funding will be prioritized for those activities identified in Table 1, eligible activities to support coronavirus and other infectious disease responses as Tier 1 priorities. Again, we do have priorities. We are not limiting you to those to submit for, but we will give funding priority to those Tier 1 activities. Next slide, please. Should insufficient applications be submitted to fully extend the current allocation of CDBG funds, all CDBG eligible activities which prevent, prepare, or respond to COVID will be considered. As you also heard earlier, we have an additional second round of funding that will be forthcoming that will include the potential of having the entitlement communities in Connecticut be eligible for those funds as well. Next slide. Reservation of rights. Very quickly, the Department of Housing reserves the right at its sole discretion to award all or a portion or none of these funds from this application, these applications, as well as reject all applications based on the quality and merits of the applications received, or when it's determined to be in the public best interest to do so. Furthermore, DOH may extend deadlines and timeframes as needed. I won't read the rest, but it's there. We need to make sure that we are nimble. The reason why I included these was God bless us all, whatever your faith may be, that we make it through the summer and not have a second wave of COVID in the late fall. As we've heard many times in the news, that is a prediction. And we want the state and the municipalities to have the flexibility to respond as quickly as possible to make sure that we protect our families, our neighbors, and our pets, as you can hear my cat. Next slide, please. At this point, we will be looking to the chat box or the conversation to be able to answer some questions. We only have a few minutes left. If we don't get to you, we will be posting the questions from the email and through the chat today on our website as soon as possible. So let me see the conversations. I'm going to scroll up to the very beginning to give everyone an opportunity. Okay.
Miguel,
yes.
This is Paula. I just
Okay.
put in all the questions for you in the chat box.
You did. Okay.
Yep.
Do you want to? Why don't you? It's going to take me ever to find these. So, why don't you start off with the first one, Paula? If you can read it off. Who added the question?
This question came in from one of the CAN manager, United Way, asking, is there a summary of what these funds may be used for anywhere on the DOH website? I feel like I'm out of the loop on this available funding and how it differs from our existing CDBG small city funding period and use. That's the
Certainly.
first question.
So the answer to that question is we will be providing a sample document that was issued by the Department of Housing and Urban Development that does describe all eligible activities, that prepares for, responds to, I've already forgotten the PRPs, that with regards to the eligible prevent, thank you. Prepare, prevent, respond to with regards to COVID. So we will have that information available to you. We also have the amendment allocation plan where you can get the information as to our priority tiers. Both documents will be made available. Next question.
The question is that a summary document somewhere I can find and review so I can understand this funding opportunity?
Yes,
I have no idea what this fund is for.
That's fine. What's this funding opportunity for? It's for the prevention, prepared, or responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. But that additional information will be provided. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I just can't find your information.
It's the most recent chat in the chat box.
Yeah, I don't see it. So can you continue?
It's not there, Paula.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
There it is now. Dominic, go ahead. You see it?
Oh, okay. I see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so Scott, we answered questions. Okay, let's see. I'm on the CDBG call right now and having tough time following what these funds are used for. Okay, we just answered that. Is that summary document somewhere I can find and review so I can understand this funding opportunity? We just answered that question. From Linda, would continued provisions of meals over the summer school when school is not in session, families with children in public schools would be eligible as Meals on Wheels? Yes, Meals on Wheels was just utilized as a common denominator. So if you are providing food for income eligible participants, it's just being lumped in under that category or that phrase of Meals on Wheels. Linda again, please clarify the ER dates for such as a local match sides. Okay, so the local match would have to have been, the environmental reviews would have to have been completed and dated on or after January 31st, 2020. And if let's say you just now completed the environmental review, from this point forward, you can be looking at a local match with CDBG COVID funds, but you couldn't match anything prior to the date that you executed. The next one from Mr. Krupp, Dale, please explain how a region can apply. Well, Dale, the homelessness aversion public service activities is a good example, as well as the Crumbling Foundations programs. In both of those activities, a lead entity is typically identified, and then from there, a nonprofit provider, in the case of homelessness aversion, is sometimes contracted. The Coordinated Access Network works with the lead community and the nonprofit provider to then recruit and enroll other participating communities so that they're able to provide a much more regional approach. But we can get into that a little bit more offline as a follow-up, sir. Craig Miner, does this activity have to prevent and prepare and respond to COVID? Yes, prevent and prepare and respond to COVID.
No. The question is it and or? And the correct response is it must prepare for, prevent, or respond to COVID-19. It is not and, it is or.
Or. Thank you, Michael, for clarifying that. And Peter, I have here, is there a maximum amount of funding that can be applied for per category per municipality? We're going to issue some additional guidance on the maximum, but it has to somewhat be reasonable. We may counter offer depending with the submissions, the number of the funding, the requests that we receive, but additional information will be posted on our website, and I appreciate that. Now, I see a question from Jennifer. Will the training certification that was required for the usual annual CDBG application also be required in order for a municipality to apply for these COVID funds? Ideally, we would love for someone to be trained. We do understand the limitations and the special circumstances. So we are happy to work with you to assure your successful, submission. But at this time, your municipality would not be required to have that certification for the COVID funding. Again, we're trying to make sure that given the unusual and really emergency circumstances, we are flexible and we will work with you. Mr. Mike Glidden, is a grant certified administrator required in order for a community to be considered? Not necessarily, as I just mentioned, but obviously we will be looking at the capacity of the municipality to be able to accomplish the administration of the grant. Miss Julie Savin, what is the per application maximum request amount? Julie, we're going to be getting you some additional information. If you have specific projects already in mind and would like to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us. If a municipality is hiring a consultant, what type of procurement needs to be done? Now this is an interesting question, Peter. And Mike, please jump in. But if potentially a community already procured someone for the submission of the CDBG application for small cities, could they amend their contract to include them working on this new CDBG small city COVID allocation?
Yes.
Okay. And
Thank you.
okay. But at this point, it's not for the purpose of the letter of the application. You don't necessarily need to hire a consultant to start the conversation with us. Miss Linda Painter, are we limited to one application or activity? For example, could we apply for multiple public service improvements, human services, PPEs, Meals on Wheels? We do not at this time have a limit as to the applications, but we are going to be looking at your ability to be able to run all of these services. And we're going to be looking at how those services, let's say, for example, I'm just going to say Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels could potentially be a larger scale regional approach that could be, with one lead municipality partnering with a provider such as Meals on Wheels to provide that services. But we will provide you additional guidance in the days to come. And I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time. This will be the last question I'll read. All the other questions will be provided answers through the FAQ that we will post online. Jacqueline, a municipality currently does not have a small cities rep for their town. Will there be any training available online? Jacqueline, in the near future, more than likely in the fall, early fall, September, October, we will be doing another training, and we are planning on either ideally face-to-face, but we will be making coordinated efforts to be also able to offer that training, again, for free to municipalities and consultants this year. And those, we will look at doing it online. But in the meantime, if you do have questions as to being able to move forward with the application, please reach out to us. We are reaching now the 1 hour, 30 minutes. I thank everyone for participating, listening in, sending chat questions. We are going to end the recording at this time. I wish everyone a well and safe weekend, and I hope everyone continues to work with us as we move forward. Thank you, everyone. And stop recording.